So hello, everybody. So glad that you could join us again. Once again, we're here. We're meeting after 2 weeks. A lot of you guys were here with us last time as well. But I just wanted to do a quick introduction and then we can start it. So I am Rabi, as you all know, from the Happiness Fit, and I'm a strengths coach.
I'm Ayeshah from the Happiness Fit. I'm a meditation coach and an energy worker.
And Lati, take it away.
I'm Latifa. I'm a clinical psychologist from corporate wellness. Welcome, everyone.
So welcome, everybody. So guys, for those of you who are new and are joining us today, Latifa, Ayeshah, and myself decided to... Hi guys. Guys, I'm going to put you on mute now that we have started. And all of you will have an opportunity to send us messages. And at the end of towards the end of our session, we'll open it up for questions as well. So just from an administrative perspective, because it gets easier to communicate. So guys, for those of you who are joining us today, Latifa, Ayeshah, and myself, we've been doing this series of talks. We started last year, Latifa and myself, and we've continued this year. And basically, these are the lounge chats that we normally do, and we wanted to bring them to all of you. And these are day-to-day topics that we discuss, that we learn from each other, and we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to participate in these calls with us and discuss what's on your mind, what's impacting you guys. And here we explore various tools that both Latifa and Ayeshah share with you. We share tips on how to handle difficult situations, relationships, or anything else that's on your mind. The last week, our session, not last week, 2 weeks ago, our session was on, are you a warrior? Are you a slave to your, what was it? Sorry, I'm like forgetting. Are you
slave of your past or a warrior of your future?
That's right.
Which category do you fall in?
Thank you, Ayeshah. And it was a great chat that we had. It was a very interactive chat. Latifa gave some really amazing tools on how to be in the present and not to worry about your future and not be a slave to your past. This week's topic is something that everybody wanted us to talk about, and we see it all the time as well in discussions, and that is about toxic relationships. So the first thing, Latifa, and I'm gonna pose a question to you. How do you, first of all, I think, how do you even define what a toxic relationship is?
I think there are so many definitions that you can look at online for toxic relationships, but I have my own spin on it, and that is that if a relationship is not serving you in a way that helps you to connect with your purpose and with your intention to have certain positive experiences, and also does not allow you to continue to be the best version of yourself, that relationship is toxic. You can go on, you can look for textbook style definitions of various different ways in which they think about toxic relationships, but in my experience in years of working, if a relationship is not serving you to be your best self and to find peace and happiness, which is the goal for most of us, that relationship is toxic. But I think we have to take it a step further. It's toxic if it not only doesn't serve you, but it also inhibits you from actually achieving that. So those are the two elements for me that would be important, that it inhibits you from being the best version of yourself and connecting to your purpose and happiness, but it also actively prevents you from being that. That's what I would say would be a toxic relationship.
And I think for me also, and Ayeshah, feel free to jump in. A toxic relationship to me is also when I feel my energy drained when I'm around that certain person. And it doesn't mean that the person is bad or evil in any way. It just means that the energy that they're carrying, so whatever they're going through, the heaviness is in their energy, and hence it feels draining.
And also, I think I also wonder sometimes about how when we say somebody is toxic, it could also go the other way, right? We could be toxic for someone else. Our energy could be not serving someone else and making them feel drained being around us or being around me. So that's a question I pose to myself as well, because it can't be just a one way. There's I think there's a clash of energies that creates that toxicity and of course behavior. So yeah, so what do you think, right?
So I think Latifa, a good point that Ayeshah brought up is it's the behavior, right? So as a psychologist, how do you identify a toxic behavior? What would you identify as toxic behavior?
I think there is no one answer to that. So let's just turn it around. How do I identify when I am being toxic, for example, right? So the first thing that you need to know, I think I just want to connect with what Ayeshah said, which is we always look outside and we think this person is toxic or this person is diminishing or this person is harming the relationship that we have. But I think it's very important to look inside and ask yourself, are you the one who's draining the energy and the life out of the room? So that's the first one is, this is, am I the person who is shutting down everybody around me? And am I the one who's not moving the relationship and the discussions forward, but I'm constantly shutting them down? And I am making people reactive rather than responsive. And in the same way, am I engaging in dialogues with people and relationships with people where they are actually sucking the energy out of me? I usually call it a black hole. And I say there's a quick audit. When I walk into the room, does the energy level rise? Or when I walk into the room, does the energy level completely suck out? In other words, the energy level falls. So am I the black hole? And then I turn it around to other people. People who are toxic are the ones who come into a relationship, a conversation, and a room, and they basically diminish the absolute positive energy in that relationship. So I have different tools that I use in the workplace, for example, and in private sessions where I say to people who constantly say but to everything that you suggest. People who constantly close down every suggestion and every idea that you have, and they constantly will say, oh, should we do this? No, but it can't work. Or the first answer to everything is no, the second answer is but to everything. And they simply close down your creativity, they close down your passion, they close down your positive energy. So Rabi, I don't know if I answered your question because I turned it around to me, but did that answer the question?
That actually does answer the question, because when we talk about toxic relationships, like you mentioned, a lot of, and I think in this conversation we're using the word energy a lot, and sometimes a lot of people don't understand what that means, right? So not everybody is aware of what to pick up on energy as well. So I think what you identified as a tool, if you are the person who's constantly negating when somebody else is giving an idea, if you're not open to even listening, or in a way that if you are listening but you're putting in the buts in every relationship, then you are creating that negative energy in that, and that, guys, is that negative energy. I think another identification is when people complain a lot, right? When there's constantly looking at any situation from a negative perspective. And of course, guys, we're all allowed to rant to our friends and family, or vent, I should say, but there has to be a limit to how much, right? Even between Latifa, Ayeshah, and myself, when we talk and we usually give each other a heads up. I'm about to go on a rant. I just need to vent this out. And then it stops, and I love that, because we give each other a heads up, and then we vent because we're human and we need to. And then the topic closes and we move on, But I think if you go on this constant rampage of negativity and complaints, you know what? We are all victims of that. We are all guilty of that. I think, to me, that adds a lot of negativity to that. What do you think, Latifa?
So I think I totally agree. It's that constant complaining. Again, we've been talking about energy, and I think there are some people who are not connected. So I think just do a check-in with how you feel when you're around a person. When you're around a person and you feel inspired to be who you are, you feel free and safe to be who you are in this relationship. And guys, we're talking about important relationships. We were laughing before the session saying, you could have a toxic relationship with your gardener or your helper because it constantly frustrates you and it brings out the worst in you. So that's a problematic relationship. But when something is really toxic, it actually feeds and seeps into different areas of your life. That's when you know it's actually being quite toxic. At the same time, when you said, Rabi, a relationship where one party is complaining all the time and it just drains your energy, that's one part of it. The other one is when your relationship, when you're not allowed to communicate, when your communication is constantly blocked, when you haven't got a voice in that relationship. So whether you're an employee in an organization and your manager just consistently doesn't allow you to have a voice, and when you do have a voice, they demean you by constantly putting you down, and they rob you of that ability to feel like you are authentic and valued, that is a relationship that has the potential to be toxic. In a marriage and in a romantic relationship, when you don't have a voice, when the other partner simply does not allow you to have needs and wants and express them in a place that is safe, so you feel judged, and you feel attacked, that is a relationship that is toxic. And guys, it's so obvious. There are two obvious places. There's a relationship with you and the person you work with, your leader or your manager, and then your partner in life. But where you have a lot of toxic relationships where people don't even realize it is your friendships.
Oh, yes.
Your friendships are potential black holes, and we have so many of them, and we hold on to them. Legacy friendships. Oh, but I feel sorry. I feel bad for this person. You need to recognize when some things, the season for that relationship is over. And I use this analogy a lot. Okay, some relationships just have a season, and you need to recognize when that season is over. You know how when you have a plant and they say that, well, I don't like to use the word they say, but plants, what we know, well, what I know is if you have a very flourishing, beautiful plant, especially orchids, when you have dry leaves on that plant and you don't remove them, they actually remove the ability of that plant to grow and flourish. You have to remove the dead leaves and the dry leaves, the ones that are dead. In the same way, you need to recognize that there are certain relationships in your life that have turned brown. The season is over. If you keep them, they will just simply diminish your ability to flourish and thrive in whichever area of your life you are.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. But it's also it can go. The same thing can happen amongst family members, right? Sometimes siblings, sometimes parents. It's that toxic relationship that we speak about could definitely, and you're absolutely right. You do have to. I mean, you can't stop loving somebody you're so close to, but you can step back and acknowledge and be aware of the fact, at least, that there is toxicity being created. So what can I do? Maybe step back
to create the boundary.
Yeah. And I think I was when we brought this topic up, I was thinking about how we can personally help with this toxicity. So it's with healthy boundaries, right, that we can create for ourselves and encourage others to create around, for them as well. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So guys, I do want to mention some of the messages that are coming. So Zaida made a very good point. She says, they're negative people, but toxic people have an air of arrogance and entitlement about them. I 100% agree with you.
Totally.
Yeah. Especially that entitlement. And guys, if I may share, a small anecdote. And that day, it really kind of hit me. So, the kind of line of work that all of us are in, which is about serving people, helping people. So we always obviously keep ourselves open to, and I know Latifa would agree with me, for people to be able to approach us and be able to talk to us. But some people also cross boundaries there and don't really respect that, this is, for example, Latifa's profession, or this is Rabi's profession. And so having a conversation as a friend is great, but being able to constantly call and talk about your problem over and over again or make it into a dumping ground is not okay. So I'll tell you a small anecdote of, like this acquaintance of mine. And, she was going through a rough patch, I remember. And she's somebody who feels emotions in a very large capacity. So and I remember we were all supposed to go out one evening, and I know this person was supposed to be there as well. An hour before we were supposed to be at the party, she calls me up and she's upset, she's crying, she's, whatever she's going through is she's feeling it exponentially. I literally spent an hour and a half consoling her, speaking to her, and it was just like mounts and mounts of like I guess, negativity that was kind of coming out and not directed at me, at her circumstances. And then she was talking about it. That was the first time I realized that by the end of the conversation, after she was done, I was drained. I remember I called up Ayeshah and I said, I'm not sure if I can actually go to the party. I feel like somebody's actually sucked out all my energy. Ayeshah said, go take a shower, get dressed, you'll feel better. Let's go to the event. Anyway, so I ended up doing that. And guess what? When I got to the party, I see that same lady right there dancing, being the life of the party, and it was like, it was so, because she had dumped it all on me and felt better. And, I call them energy vampire. And it's, again, not to emphasize, she's not a bad person. But I think what she really overdid was that dumping, which made her feel better for that one night. And the next morning she was back to square one. But it was an interesting anecdote, and it kind of reminded me of how it impacts. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Yeah.
So somebody has a question. Isa has a question. How do we get to work around the feeling entitled behavior of someone who is toxic towards you? How do we break that mold? So
I'm so glad that question, if I can take it, because yes, as Rabi was speaking, there are two things I want to make sure that we raise today. One is enabling behavior. Now, those of you who have been attending our sessions in the past will know that it's a word it's a favorite word of mine, because it's very easy for us to talk about all these people that do this to us. And Rabi, you're a good enabler for these types. We always tease you about the fact that you sit down and you become the pet, you become the fuel station for all these toxic people. They come in and they plug in.
That's me.
Super, not even special, to super, they plug in, they fill themselves up with all the fuel and they leave, and you're completely empty. So that is what we call enabling. So the first one is, a person with a sense of entitlement can be as entitled as they want, okay? If I don't allow them to paint that entitlement onto me, then it goes nowhere. So the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what am I saying and doing, or not saying and not doing, that is allowing this person to have the sense of entitlement? Now, this is quite a specific thing, and we may need to take this chat offline because it's case by case different. But I can always say there's one formula that I use a lot, which is the best answer to a fool is silence. So if all else fails, just say nothing. Because people who have entitlement and people who are arrogant and people who are trying to suck you into a conversation where they can paint the entitlement onto you, all they require is a response. It doesn't even matter what the response is. You just need to start the dialogue and they will run with it. So one of the first things you can do by blocking it is to just sit quietly and say nothing. Now, it may not be applicable for the question that you asked, but this is a formula that I use a lot. And I find that it's quite useful because they can go nowhere. They can only speak at this amount, and then there's nothing else for them to say. So I hope that was helpful to Isa.
And you're so absolutely right, Lati. And Lord knows my biggest struggle is to be silent. So yeah, that is something I must practice to be able to create that boundary. So, Alina's saying, I agree 100%. Sometimes the toxic people happen to be very close to you. You can't just throw them out of your life, but you can stress on drawing certain boundaries.
Yes. And you know what, can I please, because this is the thing I really wanted to interject with, because Ayeshah raised a question and said sometimes the toxicity lies in your family. And honestly, guys, I think in the cultures that we all exist in, and even though I think we're all from Eastern cultures, or it really doesn't matter. But especially in this part of the world, our cultures promote the fact that we need to be completely available to our family at all periods of time. And one of the most toxic relationships in our culture are the parent-child relationships. These are the ones that are so toxic and are often forgotten. So we often spend time talking about the husband-wife relationship. We often talk about the employee-manager relationship, but the one we forget is the parent-child relationship. And this is the one that is causing so much of dissonance and so much of heartache and so much of pain for so many people. So on the one level, we have parents who have not healed themselves, and they try to project a lot of their old issues and their old pain onto their children by being over-controlling or over-nurturing and thinking that they are being a good parent, okay? So if you're a parent, I want you to do a small audit for yourself. Do a checklist right now. Ask yourself this simple question. if I was the child of me, if I was the child of the parent that I am, would I feel like I am thriving and that I'm growing and that I have an environment where I feel safe to be exactly who I am, irrespective? Or would I feel afraid and shut down and judged and manipulated? If your answer is the latter, you need to relook at your parenting style, because you are not enabling your child to become the best version of themselves. You can't fix your past through your children. You have to do your own work, and your children need the freedom to go and thrive. If your answer is that the environment that I'm creating as a parent is that my children feel like they're surviving, you're doing the wrong thing, right? You need to open up and allow the space and the freedom for your kids to be able to thrive, not survive. In the same token, as a child, all right, now we spin the lens. As a child, are you demanding and demeaning of the efforts that your parents are making? Are you disrespectful? Are you selfish? Because, you know, it's a two-way street. Often we get children complaining of parents, but if you're a child and you are doing this to your parent where they don't feel valued, they don't feel supported, and they feel judged, then you need to revisit the way you are as a child. Now, I've just touched on it. We can spend a whole conversation just on this, but it strikes me that a lot of us are down the rabbit hole in this. You know, we're not getting it right, but it's just so important to recognize, am I that parent or am I that child? And what can I recalibrate to make it better?
I think you may have already selected a topic for our next session.
Yes.
I think, guys, we'll take a deeper dive into that.
So Bella is asking also a question: how do you create boundaries with toxic people who are oblivious to silence and continue being toxic no matter what you do? So Latifa, any?
So a very broad question, and I get this question a lot in the workplace as well. And one of the things I usually is I try silence, tell people try silence, it doesn't work. Then you simply try reflecting back to that person saying, you know, does it make you feel better when you behave this way? Okay, does it make you feel better? So I do a lot of questioning by rolling the ball back at this person. Right. It's very difficult for me to give a generic answer to a broad topic like this, but generally it's roll the ball back to try and switch on their awareness to what they're doing. Okay, and then simply say to them, you know what, I'm okay with you doing that as long as you're okay, but I'm not going to let it impact me. And Bella, I'm more than happy for you to write an actual example so that I can give you much more tools. But generally, we try silence, then we do a reflective questioning. So we roll the ball back by asking that person, you know what, does it make you feel better? Okay, if it makes you feel better by doing this, then please go ahead, but it's not going to impact me. And it really depends on what the relationship is, the kind of questioning that you will ask.
Yeah. So another question, Latifa. Sadaf asks, it's sad when an aging parent becomes toxic for someone's well-being. For someone's well-being. It leaves the older children very exhausted, juggling their own lives and the aging parent. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is such a common piece. I don't know if one of you want to comment on that.
I agree with you. I mean, I think that is something that we face all the time, and then with that comes a lot of guilt associated with that as well, you know, because how do you deal with it? And you cannot oust your parent, you cannot, you know, disconnect from your parent. There is a sense of responsibility, especially coming from our culture that we have. But I think for me, I personally will tell you, there are situations when I always say this, and I think it kind of works, is when you step back a little bit and actually think about the childhood or the journey that your parents have had, because they are a product of their environment as well. So the way I kind of remove myself from getting triggered sometimes or being in that situation is if I step back and I say, wait a minute, let me think about what has, you know, this person actually gone through in their life and how they've grown up and what their circumstances has been, and that somehow removes or creates a little bit of a layer for me to feel a little bit more empathy. And also another thing that I've learned from Latifa is that, you know what, it's not about me, it's about them. So she always kind of says, you know, why do you have to take ownership of everything yourself? And you don't. So if it is a parent who is creating a toxic environment, and you know they're a habit of their creature, they're like basically what you do is you step back and say, you know what, it's not me, it's them. and I'm going to be with them with compassion and love, but know that their words are not going to impact me. Whatever they're doing, I'm not going to be able to do that. And in some ways, I guess, start creating a little bit of that boundary. Yeah, I think boundary is super, super important. And it's about training them like any other thing. Latifa?
Rabi, I think you raise very important points, but I think I'm going to challenge one thing, which is,
Sure.
I think these are great tools. I try them myself, I fail. All right. Why? When I'm exhausted, I don't have the resources to be empathic. And I can tell you one thing. Parents, when they get old, they become toxic. The only thing that's different is that they have an excuse of age. But generally, they were like this when you were younger, and you didn't have you had to tolerate it, and you pushed back at it, and you were angry, and in the folly of youth, you had all of these clashes with the parent, and then suddenly they become old, and because they have the buffer of old age, you feel guilty to push back at them because you want to respect the fact that this is their journey. So the first thing you need to do is understand that if you're exhausted, your resources to deal with an aging parent or any parent is much worse. Make sure that you have great resources to fill up your own tanks in other areas. If you are going through a situation where you're dealing with a parent that is sucking the energy out of you, or two parents, first thing you know is know where your fuel is. Make sure that you know what are your energy boosters and be mindful of those and do more of those. And then the ability to have compassion and empathy for the parent is different. That is where two things are important. One is, if you think of there, we have stage theorists in psychology, one of whom is Erik Erikson, and he says that life is an unfolding of stages, and each stage provides us with a challenge to overcome, or he calls it a crisis. So he starts out with birth to 3 months, and he goes through every stage, which involves a crisis that you have to resolve. When you get to old age, it's about resolving that ability to have peace and contentment as we look at the golden years of our lives, and we look back at our past with acceptance for all our failures and all our shortcomings, and we navigate into our old age with peace and contentment. Most old people are not able to do that. They're stuck in this stage, and that is why they project a lot of their displeasure and anger on you. So as you rightfully said, you can't take it personally. So the couple of things that I would do, one is make sure that I buffer myself a lot with other things and other areas that could nurture me and put fuel in my tanks, so I have more compassion for the person that's doing it. The second one is to communicate with respect that this, even though you're old and you're my parent, it's not acceptable that you would mean and nasty to me. Because the problem that we have is that we feel so guilty, we keep sucking it up, and we don't find the right way to actually communicate in a very nice way. You know what? I understand that you're probably suffering, and I understand that you're in pain, but you know what? I'm also a human being. And when you say this, so this is the narrative. And I think, Ayeshah, we've spoken about this a lot as well, which is when you say this and when you do this, I think this, then I feel this, and then I'm compelled to do this. So this is the formula that you use, even with your old parents. You don't roll it at them and say, you make me feel this way. You simply communicate that when you do this, this is what is the thought that's triggered in me, that I'm not good enough, and everything that I've ever done for you is not good enough. I feel completely useless and guilty, and then I feel like I don't want to be in your company, and I don't want to feel that way. So can we have a different conversation? So this is the kind of narrative with an evolved parent. Otherwise, you need to find some petrol somewhere else. And then I just wanted to finish with reiterating, the not taking it personally. We go back to the 4 agreements. Okay, the 4 agreements are the most powerful tools that we have, which is don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions that whatever they're saying is exactly how you understood. Reflect it back to your parent and see whether what they're saying is really how you understood it. I guarantee you that 80% of the time what they said and what you heard is very different. So don't make assumptions. Ask a question for clarification. Okay. Don't take things personally, because 99% of what people say and do has nothing to do with you. So don't take it personally. Just take a step back, as Rabi said, and say, this is not about me. That's how I drew a boundary. It's not about me, right? Be impeccable with your word, which is only speak what you know you will commit to, otherwise stay silent. And the final one is always do your best. So do your best as a child, do your best as a parent. That is all anybody can ask of you. I don't know if that clarifies.
I love the 4 agreements. Yeah. And I was gonna say, unless your parent is a Pakistani mom and all hell will break loose. So no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not picking on Pakistani moms. But yeah, I think so. Another question here.
There's a few comments, and I'll take the question. Bella, how does one deal with a gold digger ex-wife who is trying to fleece the husband financially? Does one give in or fight back even though it is emotionally draining for the ex-husband?
Bella, that's a very complex one, and sadly a question I've heard a lot in the past. And it's not sometimes just the ex-wife, but probably the ex-family. I think the one very important tool when you're a wife that is your second marriage of somebody, it's not your relationship with them. So as much as you feel drained, you need to draw a very strong boundary around the fact that you support your partner, but you cannot get immersed into the relationship that they have with the family that they have exited from. That is the quickest way you slide down the rabbit hole. And it's a very, very difficult and tricky situation, but you harm your own relationship by starting to voice opinions, starting to be negative towards those people, allowing yourself to be sucked in. You need to support the partner that you're with, but you need to leave that battle for them to fight. You need to be able to be there for them to vent, but you need to also draw boundaries at how much venting is going to be allowed in your current relationship. In other words, every conversation you have cannot be about the problem they have with that past relationship. So you need to set clear boundaries, which is, you know what, can we just spend 1 hour a day on this, and the rest of it, it's going to harm our relationship. The other part is, if this partner keeps talking about that, you need to simply say, you know what, I may not be the best person. I'm here to support you, but this relationship that you had in the past is not the relationship you have with me. I don't have a right to judge it. I don't have a right to comment on it. That relationship is one you had before me. All I'm here to do is support you when you feel drained, but I can't be sucked in to make comments about that relationship. It's superbly hard, but people who actually, and I know people who are in a second marriage who have partners who have this relationship, and where they're successful is that they leave that in the box that is their past, and they don't allow themselves to get involved in it. It's very difficult, but once you do it, it's very liberating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a few more comments here. Somebody mentioned not talking about parents, but sometimes the other person lacks the ability to comprehend what's said. But what if you keep reflecting and saying, but it doesn't work and questions are not answered? I'm not sure I understand fully the question. Lati, do you?
I think what the person is saying is that the person doesn't have the bandwidth or the EQ to understand when you're actually doing this roll the ball back. So sometimes I think, remember what Einstein said, the first sign of madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Okay. So I always have a very simple formula. If whatever you're doing is not working, do the complete opposite. You know, the worst thing that can happen is nothing will change, but at least you've spun it on its head. So one of the things you can do is, if you tried the high level intellectual rolling the ball back, if that doesn't work, you simply say, if you're happy that what you're doing, if that makes you happy and you're okay with making me unhappy, then I'm willing to sit and be your sounding board. Sometimes it's just simply doing that. That is something any level of intellect will be able to understand. But guys, these are questions that make me realize that some of you are dealing with some very complex issues. So you may want to take this offside and have a little bit more of a conversation about it, because all of psychology teaches us one very simple thing: human beings are complex, human relationships are complex, and there's no one size fits all. So we can give you very general tools, but sometimes we need to evolve them in a better way to apply them to you, and you can reach out to one of us privately then to get better help on this.
Absolutely. So there's a comment. Zaida says, I have noticed also the prevalence of children being forced to become the go-between the parents who have become toxic in their dealings with each other. Absolutely.
So true.
That is so true, Zaida. That's a very good point. And that is something we should all be so mindful of, that we cannot take out our battles and use our kids as pawns in between. That's the worst thing that you could do to your kids. Recently, we had a client who's been in a similar situation in her childhood. And to this day, that becomes a trauma for her. Like, we don't even realize. Guys, I don't know if my voice is breaking up over here at my end, or if you guys can hear me properly. So I'm not sure. The sound today is a bit.
We can hear you. I can hear you, Rabi.
But I think just kind of going absolutely right, I couldn't agree more with you, and that's something we absolutely have to be mindful of. It makes me kind of reflect and think about one thing, Latifa, just kind of thinking about of this entire conversation, is that I think again, toxic relationship. Number one thing is you have to again create that boundary, right? But the other thing that you really mentioned here that really resonates is that we have to full. Sorry. Oh, okay. So we have to do self-care, and we have to fill our own bucket, like you always say, before we go out, because a lot of us, we get trapped into these toxic relationships because we are going in thinking we can fix it, and we love this person and we can try to maneuver through this, and until you are not equipped and you are not in a happy safe space yourself, whether it's a relationship with your child, your parent, or a partner, it's going to go downhill very quickly. And the more downhill you go or stay in that toxic relationship, the more you start also adding to it as well. What I notice is that if you stay, especially if it's a romantic relationship, and if you are, or a friendship, as you said, or one of your colleagues or your gardener or somebody, but if you keep engaging in that toxic relationship and stay in it long enough, then you become a part of creating that toxicity as well. Latifa, what do you think? Don't you agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. You enable that relationship to continue, but it's not always easy to exit a toxic relationship because it may be a parent-child relationship, it may be a romantic relationship, and toxic relationships are quite addictive, by the way, because toxic people are quite manipulative. So they are quite seductive and manipulative, and they have lots of tools in which to be able to draw you into that web of toxicity. So the most important thing you can do is stay grounded within yourself. Know what you won't tolerate, know what you're willing to tolerate. Be mindful of that right at the beginning so that you can stand firmly in what your values are and what you will tolerate. So, I know that we're running out of time, but I want, you shared a story, and I was having an argument with someone last night where they said, you created this group and now you don't speak on it, and it's ridiculous because I don't belong to groups because I really just don't like them. I belong to a lot of work groups, but not personal ones because I don't like them. And I created one that, for fun, just for people to share fun stuff. And then somebody really annoyed me on it. And I just decided to, with gratitude, let go with gratitude of the group. And everyone is now upset and they're saying, why are you allowing this person to get under you? And why are you taking personally? And I said, no, it's not about that at all. It's about a choice that I'm making to not engage with people who actually just require too much of energy for me to manage. And that is me saying, I let go with gratitude. I have no hard feelings. I'm not judging. I just choose to manage and contain my own energy in a positive way. And these are the kind of things that sometimes when you start doing that, people don't understand that because most of the people we know are addicted and stuck in toxic relationships, and they use irrational logic to justify why they're there. No, it's blood, and blood is thicker than water, and family is important. Of course they are, but if they're important, that still does not mean that you get to actually lie down and let them walk over you, right? That is something you choose to do. They're going to be who they are. You get to calibrate the depth at which you allow yourself to engage with them because you need to protect yourself. So if you want to take away one message from today, if you don't respect yourself and you don't respect your own boundaries and you don't respect your own energy and you don't take care of it, then don't blame other people when they plug in and suck it out of you.
Absolutely. I think you summarized it so well. So it's all about accountability, guys. You have to take ownership and accountability. And I think a lot of people are asking about the 4 agreements. So we'll send out a message to everybody, guys. I do want to quickly. I put together a little form. I'm gonna put that here, and I'll also send it to you on WhatsApp. Sorry, let me send it to everybody. So instead of just to Zaida, let me send it to everybody. Guys, if you can just it's a quick contact information. And if you want to be included in these talks and events that we have on a regular basis, if you could just kindly give us your name and email address and contact information so that we can put it in one collective place and we can share the details, the recordings of these sessions with you guys as well. So please take a minute before we end the call and do fill out the information so we have it and we can include you in our future events as well. Thank you so much, guys. I think we've gone over our time. We like to keep it. We like to keep it limited, but I think the conversation today was very engaging.
And I think we'll continue it next. We'll do a continuation of this. Maybe as we were suggesting, maybe parent-child.
Yeah.
Like a continuation of the toxic relationships. Yeah.
Exactly. And guys, keep sending us ideas, or what do you want to hear about? What should we discuss? Like we said, we like to keep them very casual, and tell your friends about them. Again, this is a forum that we made available. We come here once in 2 weeks to have a chat with you guys, to share our thoughts, share some tips with you all. Majabeen, I'd really appreciate it if you could actually just fill out the form instead of putting it, because the moment the Zoom call closes, guys, I lose the information. But thank you so much. Any last words, Ayeshah and Lati?
No, I'll just say it's self-awareness and creating boundaries. As I said, I think that is most important for yourself. Like Latifa was saying, you're saying that, we say this person is important. How can we do this? They're our own flesh and blood and they're important. But yes, you are also important. I'm also just as important as them, right? So your own boundaries are very important, as are theirs. Anyway,
I just wanted to, perfectly said. That's exactly what we're trying to reiterate. I wanted to just say in the 4 agreements, we will you do a session on the 4 agreements, because they're so powerful. So we will actually run a session, I think, on the 4 agreements, because I find that this is a code that I live my life by, and it makes a huge difference. And I think it's a relevant topic, so we'll do that. I also wanted to just leave you guys with, thinking about the first session that we had, which is about changing the narrative, and about looking at the narrative that we have. If you're talking about toxic people that complain a lot, ask yourself, were you that toxic person that complains all the time? And I remember saying to Rabi, in one of a conversation that we had, that I watched a documentary, and this man said something so interesting. He said, what was the amazing thing about Martin Luther King? That imagine that he came to the world and he said, I have a dream, and everybody listened to him. And in his dream, he scripted a vision of a future that he wanted, which actually reversed what the current situation was. Imagine if he said, I have a complaint. Would the world have listened to him? Okay. Ask yourself this. The next time you're going to speak to someone to try and script something that you want, okay, maybe you should do some dreaming and vision what you want in that relationship, rather than complaining about what's wrong. And maybe just that subtle change in the narrative is actually going to change the way your relationship goes. Something to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lati. And I think, again, it goes back to taking responsibility for your own actions, taking responsibility in that relationship, taking responsibility of your own mental health and your own energy, creating boundaries, setting boundaries, like everybody said, and basically taking action. I think that behavior change. I think the behavior change is super important, whether it's on your part, to be able to see a lasting impact. Well, thank you very much, guys. We will see you in 2 weeks. Do stay in touch with us, send us messages, and please fill out that form, because at least we'll be able to send you material as well. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
I have another session starting at 6, guys. So if you want 2 minutes, we can have a quick 2 minutes, and then I'm going to jump into the other session.
But if I'm going to end the call, you can dial back in.
Yeah, sure.